The Rosetta Stone, most visited artefact in the British Museum. The 4,000-year-old Egyptian treasure used to decipher ancient hieroglyphics has become the centre of a stormy debate over who owns ancient relics.
Inside a dimly lit lab, beams of light sweep across the ancient Rosetta Stone as AI reconstructs what time erased.
The Rosetta Stone was carved in the 2nd century BCE.
What if everything we thought we translated was only the surface? Researchers stare in stunned silence as hidden layers begin to emerge. Missing symbols, altered lines, patterns no human ever noticed.
It helped modern scholars translate ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Some suspect lost fragments, others whisper about deliberate concealment, or something far more unsettling.
The Rosetta Stone is a modern name. The ancient Egyptians, of course, would not have called it like this.
Faces tighten, voices drop, disbelief spreads. Because what the scans revealed wasn't just history, it was a message never meant to be read. The moment, the stone began to speak again. In a controlled laboratory far removed from the desert where it was first uncovered in 1799, the Rosetta Stone now sat under a network of scanning devices, each beam of light moving slowly across its surface with surgical precision. For over 2 centuries, this ancient slab had been studied, translated, and declared understood. But this time, the approach was different. No human eyes were leading the interpretation. Instead, advanced artificial intelligence was tasked with examining every inch of the stone, down to details too small, too subtle, for traditional methods to detect. The system did not read the inscriptions the way scholars once did. It reconstructed them. Using high-resolution 3D scanning, it mapped the microscopic depths of each carved line, measuring variations in pressure, angle, and erosion. What appeared smooth and uniform to the naked eye suddenly revealed a complex landscape of ridges, grooves, and interruptions. Patterns began to form, not just in the symbols themselves, but in how they had been carved. Almost immediately, something felt off. Certain hieroglyphs showed signs of alteration. Lines that should have been clean and continuous appeared disrupted, as though they had been carved, then adjusted. In some areas, the AI identified faint traces of earlier markings beneath the visible text, ghost impressions that did not fully align with the final inscription. These were not random damages caused by time. The system flagged them as deliberate changes. The deeper the scan went, the clearer the pattern became. This was not a single, uninterrupted act of carving. The Rosetta Stone had been worked on in phases. Sections appeared to have been modified after their initial inscription, with symbols subtly reshaped or overwritten. Even the spacing between lines showed inconsistencies, suggesting that the layout itself had been reconsidered during the process. For centuries, historians had treated the stone as a stable, unified document, a decree issued and preserved exactly as it was written. But the AI's reconstruction told a different story. Beneath the official text praising King Ptolemy V, beneath the carefully arranged Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphic scripts, there seemed to be another layer. Not fully erased, not entirely visible, but present. And that realization shifted everything. Because if the surface text had been altered, if parts of it had been intentionally revised, then the question was no longer just about what the Rosetta Stone says. It became about what it once said, and why that version was changed. What the machine uncovered was not damaged, and it was not a coincidence. It was structured. It was intent. The Rosetta Stone was never just written. It was revised, and something had been deliberately buried. Then everything changed in an instant, when evidence suggested the surface text had been altered with intent, not error. If the Rosetta Stone was revised deliberately, what truth was buried beneath it, and who decided it should remain hidden forever? Let's unravel the mystery. What was broken and what was recovered? As the implications of the altered carving settled in, attention shifted to something scholars had long accepted but rarely questioned. The Rosetta Stone was incomplete. What stood in museums and textbooks was only a surviving fragment of a much larger monument. The top section, where the most sacred form of writing once appeared, had been heavily damaged long before its discovery in 1799. Only the final 14 lines of the hieroglyphic text remained, and even those were scarred and broken, leaving entire portions of meaning lost to time. For generations, historians tried to imagine what had once occupied that missing space. By comparing the stone to similar monuments from the same era, particularly the Decree of Canopus from 238 BC, they formed a general expectation. The full structure would likely have included an additional 14 or 15 lines of hieroglyphs above what survives today. Above that, a carved scene would have shown the young King Ptolemy V presented before the gods, crowned under a winged sun disk, a powerful symbol of divine authority and protection. It was a familiar pattern, almost predictable, repeated across royal inscriptions throughout ancient Egypt, and for years, that assumption went unchallenged, until the AI began to rebuild what was missing. Using the surviving edges, spacing, and carving depth, the system reconstructed a probable layout of the lost section. It did not rely on artistic guesswork or historical tradition. It followed structure, proportion, and physical evidence embedded in the stone itself. When the reconstruction was complete, something unexpected appeared. The arrangement did not fully align with the traditional royal imagery scholars had long assumed. Certain spatial patterns suggested that the upper section was not purely ceremonial. The positioning of lines, the balance of text blocks, and the subtle alignment with the sections below hinted at a more complex design. It was as if the missing portion had served a purpose beyond honoring the king or depicting divine approval. The AI flagged irregularities in how the symbolic elements would have been placed, suggesting that the top section may have carried content that did not fit neatly into the established formula of royal decrees. This raised a quiet but unsettling possibility. If the reconstructed layout was accurate, then the missing portion was not simply decorative or repetitive. It may have contained information that connected directly to the deeper irregularities already detected within the text, a layer that extended beyond ceremony into something more deliberate, more intentional. For the first time, the absence itself began to feel meaningful, because if the stone had been altered, and if part of it had been lost, then the most important question was no longer what remained visible. It was what had been removed, and what the reconstruction suggested was difficult to ignore. Whatever was missing from the top of the Rosetta Stone may not have been ordinary at all. It may have been the key to understanding everything beneath it. Now the silence surrounding the missing fragment began to carry weight, shifting focus from what remained to what was deliberately erased. If the Rosetta Stone was altered, what truth was removed? And could that absence be the key to everything we misunderstood? Let's find out. The timeline that refused to agree. As the reconstructed upper section raised new doubts about what had been lost, attention returned to something far more visible, yet just as unsettling. It was not hidden beneath damage or buried in missing stone. It had always been there, carved clearly into the text, overlooked not because it was invisible, but because it seemed too minor to matter. The dates. The decree recorded on the Rosetta Stone had long been placed on March 27, 196 BC, during the 9th year of King Ptolemy V's reign. This date appeared in both the Greek and hieroglyphic sections, anchoring the event in a moment historians believed they understood. But that was not the only date inscribed. Elsewhere in the same text, another date appeared. November 27, 197 BC, marked the official anniversary of the king's coronation. At first glance, it seemed like a simple reference, a routine acknowledgement of a royal milestone. Yet when scholars examined the Demotic section, the common script used for everyday Egyptian writing, they found something that did not fit. The timeline shifted. The events appeared compressed, with the decree and the anniversary placed only days apart in March, contradicting the earlier sequence. For years, this inconsistency was noted, briefly discussed, and then quietly dismissed. Historians labeled it an administrative oversight, a minor error in record-keeping, the kind that could occur when translating dates between different calendar systems. It was easier to accept imperfection than to question the structure of the text itself. But the AI did not treat it as a mistake. When the system analyzed the dates, it did not isolate them as individual references. It examined their placement, their relationship to surrounding phrases, and their alignment across the three scripts. What emerged was not randomness, but repetition. The discrepancies followed a pattern. Each version of the text seemed to anchor events differently, as though each was guiding the reader toward a separate understanding of time. This shifted the interpretation entirely. Instead of one unified narrative, the decree began to resemble a layered construction.
The last lines of every text has a prescription about the publication of the text.
One version spoke to the Greek administrators who governed Egypt. Another aligned with the everyday Egyptian population through the Demotic script. And the hieroglyphic version, reserved for the priests and the divine, carried its own structured timeline, one that did not fully match the others. The possibility grew harder to ignore. These were not careless inconsistencies. They may have been intentional divisions. If that was true, then the dates were not errors at all. They were markers, carefully placed within each version of the text, guiding different audiences toward different interpretations of the same event. The stone was not confused. It was precise. And as the pattern became clearer, so did the implication. The Rosetta Stone was not delivering a single message. It was speaking on multiple levels at once, addressing different readers in different ways, shaping reality depending on who was reading it. What had once been dismissed as a simple discrepancy now carried a far heavier weight. The stone was not confused. It was speaking to two different worlds at once. Beneath its carved surface, the Rosetta Stone revealed layered meanings, speaking differently to each audience, shaping truth itself. What once seemed like inconsistency turned deliberate. Was this ancient text hiding a dual reality and warning of a throne on the edge of collapse? Stay with us, a throne surrounded by collapse. If the Rosetta Stone was speaking in layers, then the reason for that complexity could not be separated from the moment in which it was created. The text was not carved during a time of strength or stability. It emerged from a period of deep uncertainty when the foundations of power in Egypt were already beginning to crack. At the center of it all stood a boy, Ptolemy V. Epiphanes had become king under circumstances marked by violence and betrayal. His father, Ptolemy IV, Philopator, and his mother had both died in a court conspiracy involving his father's mistress. With the royal family shattered, those responsible for the killings attempted to rule in the child's name. Their control did not last. The people of Alexandria rose in anger, turning against the conspirators and forcing a sudden power shift. What followed was not stability, but a series of fragile transitions. A general named Tlepolemus took control as guardian of the young king, only to be removed and replaced by Aristomenes of Elysia, who held authority when the decree on the Rosetta Stone was issued. Leadership changed hands quickly, and with each change came uncertainty. The crown existed, but real power moved behind it, shifting between figures trying to hold together a weakening system. Beyond the palace walls, the situation was even more dangerous. Egypt's external enemies were closing in. Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire and Philip V of Macedon had allied with a clear goal: to divide and seize Ptolemaic territories. Their campaigns were not symbolic. Philip moved through regions like Caria and Thrace, capturing cities and islands. Antiochus struck decisively at the Battle of Panium in 198 BC, taking control of Coele-Syria, including Judea, and weakening Egypt's hold on its own borders. At the same time, internal rebellion continued to burn. In Upper Egypt, leaders such as Horwenifer and later Onkwenifer had established resistance that lasted for years, controlling large regions and openly defying the crown. The kingdom was no longer unified. Authority was being challenged from within and attacked from without. It was into this fragile and fractured world that the young king was officially crowned in Memphis, years after his reign had technically begun. The ceremony, recorded in the decree dated March 27, 196 BC, appeared on the surface to be a moment of celebration, a formal recognition of royal authority. But beneath that surface, the reality was far more urgent. The priests who gathered in Memphis were not simply honoring a ruler. They were navigating survival. They held influence, control over temples, resources, and spiritual authority, yet even they could feel the pressure building around them. The balance they had maintained for generations was beginning to slip. Their words, carved into stone, spoke of loyalty, generosity, and divine favor. But the context surrounding those words told a different story. This was not a kingdom at peace. It was a system under strain, a structure trying to hold itself together as forces within and beyond its borders pulled it apart. And in that moment, every inscription, every phrase, every carefully chosen detail carried more weight than it appeared to. This was not a celebration. It was a civilization trying to survive its final moments. Etched declarations praised loyalty and divine favor, yet the surrounding reality revealed a system under immense strain, quietly fracturing from within. Were these inscriptions honoring power or concealing collapse as a civilization struggled to survive its final, irreversible moment? Keep watching. When the words returned, but the meaning did not. The deeper the political tension of that era became, the more one question began to surface. If the priests were under such pressure, and if the message carried more than it appeared, then how had it remained hidden for so long? The answer lay in a silence that lasted for centuries. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the knowledge of how to read hieroglyphs slowly disappeared. What had once been a living system of writing became a forgotten art. By the 4th century AD, almost no one in Egypt could understand the symbols carved into temple walls. The chain of knowledge had been broken as temples closed and priestly traditions faded away. In the centuries that followed, attempts were made to recover the meaning, but they often led in the wrong direction. In the 5th century, a priest named Horapollo wrote a text called Hieroglyphica, claiming to explain the symbols. His interpretations were widely accepted for generations, yet much of what he described was incorrect. Instead of bringing clarity, it deepened the confusion. Later, scholars from the Arab world in the 9th and 10th centuries approached the mystery with fresh ideas. They began comparing the ancient symbols with Coptic, the language still used in Egyptian, churches. European scholars in the 16th and 17th centuries continued the effort, but progress remained limited. The symbols were still seen more as artistic expressions than a true written language. Everything changed with the discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799. For the first time, the same message appeared in 3 scripts, including Ancient Greek, a language that could still be read. This offered a path forward, but it was not an easy one. Early researchers such as Johann David Åkerblad and Antoine Isaac Silvestre de Sacy began identifying names within the text, slowly building connections between the scripts. They made important progress, but they could not fully unlock the system. The next step came from Thomas Young in 1814. He noticed that certain symbols were grouped within oval shapes known as cartouches, marking royal names. He also recognized that the scripts were connected, that Demotic writing had evolved from hieroglyphs. This insight brought scholars closer, yet the full breakthrough still remained out of reach. It was Jean-François Champollion who finally completed the task. In 1822, he identified phonetic patterns within the hieroglyphs, using names such as Ptolemaeus and Cleopatra to build an alphabet. His work proved that the symbols represented sounds as well as ideas. With that realization, the ancient language was brought back to life. For generations, this was considered the end of the mystery. The words had been recovered. The text had been translated. The Rosetta Stone had given up its secret. But now, with the AI examining structure, patterns, and deeper relationships within the text, a new realization began to take shape. Human translation had focused on what the words said. The AI was asking why they were arranged the way they were. And that difference changed everything. Because it suggested that the message had never truly been lost. It had only been misunderstood. As artificial intelligence began decoding hidden structures and patterns, a startling realization emerged, shifting focus from meaning to intention. Had the message ever been lost at all, or were we simply unable to see what was always there? Stay glued. The message beneath the words. As the gap between human translation and machine analysis became impossible to ignore, attention shifted from what had been read to what had been overlooked. The AI did not approach the Rosetta Stone as a simple historical artifact. Instead, it treated it as a structured system, comparing its linguistic patterns with thousands of ancient texts across cultures and time periods. What emerged did not align with the expected tone of a ceremonial decree. Certain phrases within the hieroglyphic section immediately stood apart. These were not the typical expressions found in royal praise or temple inscriptions. Their rhythm, structure, and word choice followed patterns rarely seen in Ptolemaic ceremonial writing. When compared with Egyptian religious and prophetic texts, the similarities became difficult to dismiss. The language carried the tone of warning literature, a form used when scribes believed they were confronting moments of serious danger or irreversible change. This alone would have raised questions. But the AI went further, connecting linguistic patterns with contextual references inside the text. The decree praised Ptolemy V for managing an unusually high Nile flood during his 8th year, describing how excess waters were controlled to protect farmland. For centuries, this had been seen as a routine acknowledgement of leadership. The AI interpreted it differently. It analyzed the timing, numerical references, and seasonal context, then compared them with historical and astronomical records from the same period. The alignment was striking. The flood's timing, its description, and its placement within the text suggested more than observation. It appeared to fit within a broader sequence of environmental and celestial markers. When combined with known political instability, a clearer pattern emerged. Invasions, internal conflict, leadership shifts, and natural irregularities were not isolated. They formed a chain that the priests may have been tracking. These were not random details. They were signals. The men who gathered in Memphis in 196 BC were among the most educated of their time. They understood the fragility around them. And according to the AI, they may have used the structure of the decree to preserve something they could not openly declare. A warning. Not written plainly, but embedded within language, timing, and layered meaning. A message hidden from casual readers, yet visible to those who looked deeper. This possibility transformed the Rosetta Stone. It was no longer just a tool for rediscovering language, but a deliberate record carrying more than one purpose. Because if the AI is correct, the priests were not only documenting their present, they were preparing for the future. So, what do you think? Was the Rosetta Stone a key or a warning meant for us, and are we already repeating their fate? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.